Michigan Magazine is kept on the road by our many Michigan friends. Cops and Donuts Bakery, downtown Clare, a winning combination. Cops and Donuts. Thunder Bay Resort, a destination for all seasons with special events and packages. Thunder Bay Resort in Hillman. Cops and Donuts Bakery, downtown Clare, what began as a crazy idea among 9 police officers to purchase the historic Clare City Bakery quickly became an international phenomenon, carrying on a Michigan tradition with delicious donuts, pies, pastries, breads, original coffee, and more, plus a full menu at the new adjacent Traffic Stop Diner. Downtown Clare, a winning combination. Cops and Donuts. On this week's Michigan Magazine, we celebrate the life and times of the original radio Lone Ranger, Brace Beemer. The voice of Michigander Brace Beemer as the Lone Ranger filled the airwaves each week, coast to coast in the early part of last century, and is still remembered in his hometown of Oxford, where the first Brace Beemer Festival was held in 2013. We'll visit with family and friends at the festival as they reminisce. But first, we bring you the 10 Million Mile Man, James LaPlante, U.S. Diplomatic Currier. This UP native has stories to tell that'll curl your toes in his autobiography that traces the highlights of his career as safekeeper and deliverer of important U.S. documents to every continent in the world. Stay tuned, it's all coming up on this week's Michigan Magazine. Hale Hardware, your do-it center in Hale, Michigan. Much more than a regular hardware store, providing everything you need for whatever your project is, along with a knowledgeable sales staff to get her done. Serving Northern Michigan since 1946. Hale Hardware, south of M65 at Ainsley in Hale. Rose Valley Winery on Beechwood Road in Rose City. See what thousands are raving about, creating a delicious variety of award-winning Michigan wines. Stop by and taste for yourself. The taste of Michigan is yours at Rose Valley Winery. He's the 10 Million Mile Man, Robert James LaPlante of Manistee, Michigan. He's lived a life many of us can only dream about or read about in adventure magazines. In a career that's taken him around the world, he's met many luminaries of the 20th century. He's sipped whiskey sours with Ernest Hemingway in Venice, chatted with Albert Schweitzer in East Africa, President Harry Truman in Washington, D.C., and was the personal backstage guest of Duke Ellington. What type of career could this man have had that would take him around the world to some of the world's most exotic places? Robert J. LaPlante is a diplomatic courier of the United States of America. We still use the word "is" because he is officially on call if circumstances warrant, but mostly he's retired, living in his rusty cabin along the northern shores of Lake Michigan in his beloved Upper Peninsula. We learned of Robert's exciting life by way of his unusual fireplace. Receiving an interesting note from a viewer that told of Robert's fireplace that is constructed from material collected from around the world. As a matter of fact, there's a place where one can place one's hand and touch all continents of the world at one time. In a recent visit to Robert's home just out of Manistee, we were welcomed and invited inside for a fireside chat with this fascinating man. With artifacts and mementos from his world travels surrounding us on the walls and on the shelves, Robert began our visit with an explanation of just what entailed in the job description of Diplomatic Courier of the United States of America.
Well, there are a few people in this country who are selected, studied, trained, and sent out with the most important information our country has. And the information is so important that we have to put a body between the pouch containing the messages and ourselves. And we want to keep it away from praying eyes and hands, and it's a very high honor and a great adventure at the same time.
I bet it's taken you to all points of the world, hasn't it?
Oh, I can't believe it. I'm home with bad eyes now, but I think my total of countries worked in is 197. My mileage is 10.8 million miles, and that's why I call my book the 10 Million Mile Man.
Oh, my goodness. This is a copy of it right there, the 10 Million Mile Man. What in the world got you into the Diplomatic Courier
It's a long story going back to World War II.
Uh-huh.
When I was in the Pacific, and I would make an occasional communication run to some island for my ship. And I would run into these civilians wearing trench coats and fedoras and whatnot. And I said, "What are you guys doing out here? You're going to get your head blown off. This is a dangerous part of the world." They said, "Well, we got all shot up at Pearl Harbor, and the government decided that we were good material for the Diplomatic Courier Corps, and that's what we are. We're diplomatic couriers." I said, "What's that? I've got to check into this." So after I was a GI Bill student at Michigan, I applied, and it took me several years to do it. But one day I was extremely fortunate to have been selected for the Corps of U.S. Couriers. Of whom there are only 51 were at that time, but I suppose it's about 70 nowadays. And it's quite interesting that we have some lady couriers.
And your cabin, your cottage, your home here in the Upper Peninsula is kind of a living or a museum of your past. I mean, you've got all sorts of paraphernalia. You've got autographs from a lot of different very influential people in the world. And you found a place here in the Upper Peninsula to call home. Why do you love the Upper Peninsula so much? I mean, why?
This is where I originated.
This is where you originated.
My grandfather was a pioneer here in 1881, and I gave it the name Fitzgerald Forrest because I love the man. And we lost him, of course, but it's a place that I can really associate with. I used to run up and down that beach here barefooted, and here I am living in my own homeland. It's the best of the 197 countries I've seen.
I was going to ask you, what would comparing this to all the world, there's no place like home, I guess. You know?
I think that's more than an axiom, it's a verity.
Right. And in your travels, we were drawn to this story of you, Bob, and in your travels through a person who told us about your amazing fireplace and how if you stuck your hand in the fireplace, you'd have the ability to touch all corners of the world. Is this true? Is this?
Yes, may I demonstrate that for you?
Do that.
Okay.
And this is the fireplace here.
You put your hand right there, you're touching 7 continents. That is to say, you are touching the entire Earth. And a piece of the Berlin Wall, and a famous little town nobody knows about called LaPlante, South Dakota.
The center of the universe. But how in the world did you just packed up the stones and as you were in your travels?
I have a stone collection, actually, from Viking ruins, where I was an excavator, archaeologist, up in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I kept picking up stones, and one day I said, I'm only lacking 2 stones. I think one was Asia through an oversight, and the other was Antarctica. So I made it my trouble to get to Antarctica twice. And so I have an Antarctic stone, South American stone, Asian stone, Australian stone, Asian, European, North American, all here.
My goodness, that is something to say. Through all your travels throughout the world, is there any stories, I'm sure there are, that are your favorite to tell, perhaps, of your journeys, as far as something that sticks in your mind as a highlight in your life?
It's in my book, and it's called Near Death Over a Greenland Abyss. And it's so scary that I can't read it anymore. I get goose pimples. I don't even like to discuss it, but I will with you. I was that far from falling 3,000 feet to certain death.
Really?
And you knew it. The Eskimos said, if you had gone over the edge, nothing would ever see you again except the white-tailed eagle. Because no human can walk down there, it's so wild.
What took you to that part of the world?
A salmon safari. And I have a fish in my den from that ecaloop, we call them, it's Greenland salmon.
So as far as beauty and countries, as far as beauty, what would you say is one of the most picturesque that sticks in your mind? Is
the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Yeah.
Austrian Alps.
Oh, yes.
Scandinavia, especially Finland and Sweden. I spent a year in Sweden as a graduate student among 5 other universities. I was a starving student until I was about 30. And I'm a single parent, glad to be one, and I've learned a great deal from it. I get along beautifully with my son. He's a big kid now, going to school in Europe.
So he's a world traveler too. That's in his blood, in a
yes,
way?
he is, yes. He just did a trans-African trip with his girlfriend in an old folks wagon, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Just a marvelous trip that they had.
Well, that does sound nice. Interesting. So what would you say to a person who had the desire to do some traveling like that? Is it something that is really worthwhile?
I believe an extended journey, not less than 6 months, throughout the world is the equivalent of a PhD.
Really?
And it's very humbling. You find out that people's similarities are greater than their differences. That's a tremendous lesson.
Yeah, it is.
Whew.
We're like more than people would like to stop and think and believe.
Yes, you start to recognize the similarities. Even in some remote place like Tasmania, I found people who were very similar to us. And so it goes.
And so it went with us that afternoon along the shores of Lake Michigan as Bob related story after story that he's documented in his new book, The 10 Million Mile Man. The Journeys of a U.S. Diplomatic Currier is a spellbinding account of Bob's journey via horse cart to jet airliner, traversing many time zones and adjusting to the varied cultures that he encountered. It was quite overwhelming to talk one-on-one with a man whose life's journey most assuredly has affected millions of people in one way or another. It became even more overwhelming when we found out that Bob was not only a U.S. diplomatic courier and explorer, but also archaeologist, a jazz musician performing in 36 countries, and a prolific writer with several newspaper articles and 2 academic volumes titled The Viking Surge and They Sold Their Home. With a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's in Scandinavian history, he also found time to serve his country in World War II as a naval combat officer. This Michiganian truly has lived a full and exciting life, a life you can now get a glimpse of through the pages of the spellbinding stories in The 10 Million Mile Man. With these words by Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., Bob begins his book. As life is action and passion, it's required of a man that he should share the passion and action of his time, at peril of being judged not to have lived. Well, with the publication of The 10 Million Mile Man, if Bob were judged today, he would be most definitely judged a man who has lived life. We thank Bob for his kind hospitality that day and for sharing his life with Michigan Magazine. Michigan Magazine is being brought to you in part by the Michigan-made rebounding mailbox pole. Never again worry about the winter snowplow taking out your mailbox with this ingenious rebounding pole. Your mailbox takes a hit and keeps coming back year after year. Call now or visit their website, toughmailboxes.com. Luzerne Express Campground is the premier campground with everything to make your northern adventure complete. Modern and rustic campsites, equestrian campers welcome, a huge market with bakery and deli, nearby RV, hiking, and horse trails, along with a complete canoe, raft, and kayak rental. Visit us online, then call for more information and reserve your spot today. Clemix Sales and Service on Mapes Road, west of Mile, your complete recreational vehicle sales and service connection. Visit their beautiful showroom of new and pre-owned ATVs, lawnmowers, power equipment, snowmobiles, utility vehicles, and more. Clemix Sales and Service is also the home of the American-made Victory motorcycle line on display at Clemix on Mapes Road, Mile. From the 1930s to the early 1950s, children could be found gathered around the old tube radio to hear the adventures of the Lone Ranger. Those were exciting times with heroes of the Old West coming to life in the minds and imaginations through the miracle of radio. There's one community in Oakland County, Michigan that takes pride in the fact that they played an integral part in this time in history. Oxford, Michigan lays claim to being the true home of Brace Beemer, the man whose voice was the most recognizable as the Lone Ranger. Beemer was born in Mount Carmel, Illinois back in 1902, but from 1941 through his passing in 1965, Michigan was his home as he broadcast the Amazing Success series from the studios of WXYZ Detroit. From 1941 through 1954, Oxford has always recognized this notable fact, but it's just recently that they pulled all the stops out by celebrating Lone Ranger Days with a big fund drive aimed at creating a statue as a memorial to their favorite son. It's going to be an annual event. Michigan Magazine was at last year's event with Jim Hughes. Terry Stiles, and camera crew Jeremy Lane and Darlene Lane, who caught all the excitement of a community bursting at the seams with pride. Events included a gigantic parade, sidewalk sales, art displays, tours of the Beemer homestead, and a local museum overflowing with Brace Beemer memorabilia. This is where part one of our festival coverage begins, as Jim Hughes meets and visits with a grandson of the Lone Ranger.
And we are actually in the Oxford Museum right now. It is, of course, the Lone Ranger days with the Home of the Mask. A lot of great things have been lent to the museum for people just to come in. And it's just what a great collection here at the museum today. With a gentleman here who has an association with Brace Beemer. We're going to find out a little bit more. What's your name, sir?
My name is Bob Daniel.
Now, what is your relationship to Mr. Beemer?
He was my grandfather.
And I understand that you have a lot of things that you've contributed here with pictures. And tell me how you feel about a day like this, you know, honoring your grandfather. Obviously, Oxford's been synonymous with the radio home of the Lone Ranger. How do you feel about it today? I mean, now that it's coming to fruition.
I think it's fantastic. I've been looking forward to this as soon as I heard about it. I think it's one of those things that's a great thing for the community, and obviously we're really happy that it's honoring my grandfather.
You, as I say, there's a lot of things that you were sharing with people, like older photos, and the house on Drainer Road. Obviously, you have some early pictures there, and it's kind of a great identifier here for the community.
Absolutely. I mean, people know about the farm. They know about the home out on Drainer Road. A lot of people actually live on the farm, actually, if you think about it, because it was developed after he left the series and turned into residential property. So I think there's 5 lakes out there, and there's homes around the lakes that folks bought the property during that period from about 1954 up until the mid-60s.
No, you're from where? You said it was Nashville.
Nashville.
And how long have you been? Have you heard about the festival? And I mean, how long have you been part of it here?
Well, this is the first time I've actually been a part of it. There was a festival here, of course, I think it was 1982, when they were originally raising money to put up the statue, and my mother and my father came up for that festival, which of course turned out to be the middle of an ice storm, so there were some challenges there, but they had a great time, and it's just great to see that now here we are, even if it is 30 years later, that we're really bringing out just the whole connection between the community and my grandfather and the radio program, especially because this is the 80th anniversary year of the first broadcast.
Obviously, yeah, a lot of information's been shared with our local newspaper, and I mean, not only was he the radio Lone Ranger, but I mean, a war hero as well.
Absolutely. He was the youngest member of the American Expeditionary Forces in World War I. He lied about his age. On his original enlistment, it lists him as 18 years old, and I think it's called 18 and a third or 18 and a quarter years old. And they actually went back later to prove that he was actually 14 years old.
And what I understand, he was also was it a U.S. Marshal as well? They made him
They made him an honorary Texas Ranger.
Texas Ranger, okay.
He was inducted into, I think, any place that he made a personal appearance. He was made a member of the law enforcement community there. And he was made a member of the Legion of Frontiersmen in Canada. And became an honorary member of a number of Native American tribes, from Seminole to Pawnee to Sioux.
Anita, I am Terry Stiles, and I'm from Oxford, but I have not been in this community as long as you have. You grew up here, right? And your name?
My name in high school was Anita Joanne Moses, and Barb Beemer was a grade behind me. She graduated in 47. I graduated in 46. But I spent many hours with her. We were good friends at the farmhouse with Brace, listening to the recordings of his programs. My husband came from Rochester, New York, and his niece and nephew, ages 7 and 9, as I remember, came to visit. And I said, "Would you like to meet the Lone Ranger?" Unbeknownst to me, the nephew was very allergic to animals. But we went, I called Brace. He said, "Give me an hour," because he loved to dress up in saddle Silver at that time. And so we went out. The kids got to ride Silver in the paddock, and he talked to them for a while. And the nephew was very ill for 2 weeks after, but the happiest kid in New York State.
Well, thank you for sharing that story with us. It's always nice to get that little personal bit of what he was about as a human being.
Stay tuned, Lone Ranger fans. We'll have much, much more.
Vacation. Don't make the planning of it more than what you're trying to get away from. At northernmichigancabinrentals.com, you can choose from over 2,500 cabins, cottages, lodges, resorts, lakefront vacation home rentals, and more. Whatever experience you're looking for, from rustic to luxury and everything in between. No more rustling with telephone books. No more endless internet searches. Just one site with over 2,500 Northern Michigan destinations. northernmichigancabinrentals.com.
Thanks for joining us along Michigan's back roads. Time to hit the road again, but now before we give you the phrase of the week, it is Riverside Saginaw Film Festival, which is another wonderful film fest headed for Saginaw in its 6th annual event, November the 6th through the 9th. Take the phrase, send it to us via email or a card or letter, and we'll see you here on the next edition of Michigan Magazine. We'd like to thank all those that help keep Michigan Magazine on the road. Thunder Bay Resort, a destination for all seasons with special events and packages. Cops and Donuts Bakery, downtown Clare, a winning combination. Cops and Donuts. Your northern experience is never complete without a stop at the historic Ma Dieters of Luzerne. Enjoy the ambiance inside or outside on the huge patio area. Order from the complete menu with entrees served hot, fresh, and good. Come experience Ma Dieters in the heart of God's country, Luzerne, Michigan. Flu season. Be prepared. Get your immunizations now at Rose City Drug, your one-stop pharmacy, home health care, and medical supply outlet, offering a variety of on-site immunizations. Walk-ins are of course welcome. Call now for more information. Experience the beauty, artistry, and taste of Northern Michigan. Come to Amish Country Natural Products on Mount Tom Road, north of Mile, just off M33. From arts and crafts to fresh foods and vegetables, all natural, all local, all good. Stop by and get acquainted with Amish Country Natural Products, 1454 North Mount Tom Road, Mayo. Hingeman Acres Canoe Livery and Resort on M33, just north of Mayo, catering to the outdoor enthusiasts. Cabins, canoes, kayaks, rafts, and more. Daytime or overnight trips along the world-famous Asabo River. A family getaway for over 75 years.